for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine.
So hey everyone, and welcome. So I couldn't be left alone, I couldn't be bothered, and my heart didn't feel fulfilled if I didn't finish something that I started talking about in the previous video. So you know who it is with me. I am long gone, I'm in these energies, and then it's so good, it's so exciting to be back online actually and to speak to all of you, although I do still have so much work. But it's kind of like I put it aside for a while because I'm just so enthusiastic again to be able to be in front of the camera for now. And I was a Heidi today. I actually went hiking above the hills because, you know, we live in the hills now. I'm a hillbilly, and sorry guys, the wind is just so crazy. And the moment I came here today, the wind got so intense that it almost blew me away. And we have these intense waves of heat and then these winds, and it's really intense, the weather. So I can't do much right now because it's so hot. So I figured I'm going to record a specified topic on something that I was talking about in the previous video about the karmic retribution. And when it comes to light family and dark family, family of light and family of dark, it is what it is. You know, there are these materials that I already mentioned that exist out there, like comparisons and further establishments about the Nephilim race versus the Christ race, or, you know, there's many different names for it. But as I mentioned in the previous video, I call them the Immaculate Ones, or God or Source calls them the Immaculate Ones, or the Illumined Ones. So the Illumined Ones, as the light beings, are those beings who've never fallen. They've never fallen from grace. And in between is this realm of souls that are still kind of trying to gain their lessons in sovereignty and remember who they are as the first spark of the divine. So when these creations went off and each member of the what was primarily the Elohim family, or the family of creation angels, began to divide further and further until what we know now exists as the family of dark and the family of light. So these constant battles and struggles have been going on for eons, as you know. But in today's video, I specifically want to go further in explaining the karmic retribution and why certain things are happening the way they are now, and the role of light beings in this. Because as a servant of God, as the messenger of the divine, it's something that, you know, is very inherent within me, that I need to serve divine will or God's will. And when it's something that God just wants me to talk about, I need to put it out there. And these are my own realizations through my own earthly experiences. I'm gathering these experiences, and it's beyond knowledge. It's just insights into profound nature of divine universal structure, hierarchy of light, light beings and light intelligence, and how it's actually playing itself out. Because a lot of people know divine law is something very basic, and the law of one, the law of unity, but they don't understand the multiple functions and fractions that actually exist. And when you're a light being and you're exploring yourself in the earthly realm, during your tests, your trials, your tribulations, and your initiations, there's much you actually come across. But before I actually start with today's topic and give you a little further insight into the karmic retribution and divine justice that's always being served and the way it's being served, I want to mention that yesterday, on the day of the solstice, I actually received my first big channeling. I just sat there in my hammock and started writing, which is... it's old, it's ancient, and yet it's new for me. So I was very excited that I finally was able to be in that state. I finally got an answer to something that was quite bothering me, that was bugging me behind the scenes, because I couldn't see the bigger picture. And I've shared with you how the darkness is hijacking us all the time. It's trying to give us this false interpretation of what's actually happening so we wouldn't finish the mission. A while ago, my beloved actually came to my mother. You know him as this amazing luminous being called Aurea. He's Aureas, which are both my higher Elohim counterparts. Divine partner and divine marriage. They exist in this, what we call sacred union, or Hieros Gamos, but it's a light being version of what we know on earth and what we're seeding and anchoring and integrating right now through our earthly experiences and our earthly bodies. So he came and he actually started giving my mom guidance for me, because I was in such low states after this transgression, and all the energies that I'm still releasing through my body, they're still there, and they sometimes come as outbursts. It's really intense, and they cause me still pain and fatigue and all these things. It's not as much as it was before, but they're still there. And as long as I have these outbursts when I'm like, oh, you know, darkness is leaving my body, which was the darkness that was incepted. So today I'll share more about why this was so, and a bigger version of what actually took place, and you know what light beings are doing, because I didn't share as much here publicly that I did on Patreon. I did more videos about these topics there, and especially in my galactic updates. But for now, I just wish to say that when Aurea came, he told my mother that there was never such a being quite like myself. He said, Aurea's power, he said, she's irreplaceable. And in many ways, her essence is established by me knowing who I am as her child, as her direct descendant of light, as her Elohim earthborn, her divine human child being. I hope you're able to hear me, because the wind continues, and it's not the pleasant wind. You know, Aurea's winds are quite different. They're very gentle and yet firm and strong. These are more on the other side of the equation, so I don't want to talk about this as well. But all these forces of light and dark express themselves also as weather patterns. And the reason why our weather has been getting more and more intense is not just because we're traveling through the photon band and all that, and that's the truth, but there's much more behind that when you know the world of spirit, and these spirits being the manifestations of these elemental energies. So we know the fallen Elohim energy expression and the original Elohim, which is the prime Elohim family of light, which I am, of course, direct descendant of. And many of you are also extensions of, and you came on earth eons ago, and you had your earthly lifetimes. And in a way, how I was shown my mission is just, I'm the awakener of this consciousness in the human psyche, in the human embodiment, and in terms of understanding yourself as a part of this higher light intelligence. So it's kind of like the mission of training into this intelligence begins on earth. It's more difficult to establish that in what is often called the realms of purgatory, right? The realms of cleansing and detoxification for the souls, which naturally all the souls have to go through, especially souls that are very burdened in their expression and where they are in their own self-expression and what they're currently exuding. These laws are, of course, universal, but the problem with them is that darkness is hijacking a lot of this intelligence as well, making these souls believe in different status quo reality than it's the true nature of divine soul origin, the soul home, the soul longing that is of source, and of the original prime creator light family, the family of light. And it's a very natural self-born intelligence that lives within us. Okay, so when Aurea came, he was giving this information that's very simple, very basic to my mother, because he said, the moment I know who I am, it's like all the power starts to circulate within me. And the spiral of white light that I am is my highest expression. I always see myself as just this quick, instantaneous spiral of white light. That's my highest expression, is when I'm tuning into. That's how I see myself. It's nameless. It's just life force expression that moves into whatever kind of form that source wants to work with and conjure up at that particular time. So that's the ultimate way of serving source, is being the extension, the vehicle for where source wants to direct that life force, right? And what we talked about in the previous video, source wants to extend that intelligence now into these unions, these divine unions, coupling formations coming together. But I won't go into that today, because that was a long, extensive video. Today I want to say something more about the nature and purpose of light beings who are direct descendants. This means we didn't have earthly lifetimes or incarnations, but we came directly as these self-born beings that are direct manifestations, creations of our higher illumined counterparts, right? So when these counterparts decide, they go into conjured up sacred union. So in order for me to be created, I've talked about this before, Aurea and they went into this state of union and envisioned their offspring and envisioned where, how, and what the mission would be like. So the next thing I want to talk about, which is justice being served through karmic retribution. Let's start with the beginning, right? So when the darkness divided itself from what we call divine trinity of life, which is the sacred principle of how life triangulates and how life just super extends upon itself, is it became a separate fraction, right? It no longer wanted to exist as source, family, foundation, and be under the dominion of divine law. It wanted to create its own dominion, which we now know as many fractions and interpretations and manifestations of the dark. In our world, we know this as the matrix, the status quo, the limbo, the encircled karmic wheel, instead of the spiral of life, which is the spiral of ascension, and many masters and teachers of light spoke about and continuously work on dispensating the sacred knowledge. The difference between me and these teachers is I'm actually not much of a teacher. I'm more of a tantric embodier, because my path was just to be this pure vehicle and to channel and direct that life force where source wanted that light to go. So let me start by explaining something that wasn't quite understood by me as the human counterpart until I really got it figured out, right? So one thing that I started talking about in the previous video, why darkness cannot get its karmic retribution. You have to understand divine law, and this is what source, as God showed me, and pure ones, we're always shown the truth through source, because we have that purity. God chose us because of that, right? We are the chosen ones in that regard because we're pure, we're immaculate. That's how God sees us. That's how we were created. So in order for God to have dominion over a specific realm again, God has to send its divine, not just messengers, but embodiers into specific realm of creation. We know Earth as Theta, in a way, being for eons and eons of time very much entrapped and a part of the Luciferian program and agenda, which was just many fractions. You know, Luciferian agenda later became many divisions and fractions, which we know is different ET beings, but in a way they all kind of, you know, originate from the same first division of that which separated itself from the original prime source light, prism of light creation, right, which is the white prism of light, and how that light creates through divine intelligence of divine law. In order for that to be universal, these laws have to be sustained. And so we know these higher legions of light and divine councils of illumined light who keep those laws in motion. But when darkness enters specific realms, such as here on Earth now, the darkness can enslave and completely ensnare. Actually, right, that's a very dark word, to ensnare something or someone, but it's the truth. And completely put this veil of thick illusion around these, not just certain individuals, but whole worlds, sometimes even entire star systems, because there wasn't enough awakened light or those who existed within the primary creation laws. What that means is, you know, in our world, right, if you look at what's happening, if there's not enough people awoke to what's happening, they're not going to say, whoa, there's something wrong here. They're not going to complain. They're not going to do anything about it. They're just going to live through the status quo, right? So as in our world now, we're just going to wear the masks, even though we know everything's a total hoax, and we're all being lied to, and people are just living with these lies and sets of these illusions, almost like, yeah, it's good for them. So they're sustaining that reality. So they're not complaining about it. So they're not actually petitioning to source that this is not the reality they want to live in. So in order for a realm to awaken, right, we needed that, which many people call the number where things start to, when there's a superflux of energy, right, the critical number or degree of light intelligence. And on Earth, even though in many New Age sources which said, yeah, you know, we're now reaching this critical mass, how I see it, how my light family sees it, it's far from it. And that's the reason why even Jesus the Christ continuously says, I continuously am sending my divine disciples, devotees, to this path in order for there to be a breakthrough through the status quo. But not all of these are successful. Not all of these missions will be successful because they're not so predictable. They're very unpredictable, very risky as well, as I already explained it. And many of them will not even sometimes awaken, or many of them will have these setbacks, or they're going to be attacked and all of these things, right? So that the mission would not be completed. But I want to explain more why the darkness works so hard in running down these beings and us, because I told you, like, I'm the main target for years now, is because of the power that we carry. Because let me explain this now. When you are a primary source incarnation, that means you're the Immaculate One. You're the chosen one from that statement. It means you hold a level of purity that is the immaculate design that many call the 144,000 light quotient. That's basically an approximation of divine light intelligence that you have as the Christ exuding, like exuding the Christ light. That's what many times we associate the 1444 number with the Christ light and intelligence. And it's not just the masculine Christ, as you know, but it's also the feminine Christ. In the previous ages, many of these master beings who had an affinity to carry this Christ light were masculine. But because of that and how the status quo was, things couldn't progress as much. Spirit recently told me, well, my family of light explained to me that the light beings who come to earth and their masculine expressions, they're very vulnerable in the way they carry their light. The solution was to bring through the feminine Christ, because the feminine Christ was even more suppressed. But in order for that to happen, we needed to have enough predecessing light intelligence that comes into embodiment as the masculine Christ, right? For the feminine to then eventually take her throne. Because I explained already, there is this battle between the original initiation of that fallen essence, which was the Luciferian agenda, which began as a she. The feminine principle of life and creation that creates and moves life forward through the spiral of light has fallen. So the feminine was the only one to take back that throne, and eons of time and investment in the light being realms went into that, into the liberation of Gaian consciousness and all life on the planet, which we now see doesn't really resonate much with the liberated energy, right? We don't see that freedom. We don't see that liberation. When you walk upon the planet, you see everything is just tightening its grip more and more, and we're not really feeling that freedom. So in order for that to occur, light beings at the feminine Christ level needed to come and be more successful in their missions, and I was one of these plans of Illumined Union in God. And recently Jesus the Christ actually told my mother that they're very much proud of the work I've been doing, because a lot of the light beings have chosen to leave. They weren't as strong, they weren't as feisty and persistent. And actually, my essence, my nature, my true essence is that any plan that God would give me as a backup plan, like first we had a plan A, B, C, there was many backups. And I was shown that I've agreed upon many of these backups, even though they were no longer the original plan. They were maybe more difficult. But each time I said yes, because that's how devoted as a soul essence being, as a light being I am to God and serving this plan. And that's why God said that beings like this are so important. I'll tell you more about the karmic retribution now. So you have to know, when no one complains, when no one witnesses an event or something specific that the dark ones are doing, it's going to remain. And it doesn't mean, wow, there is no God that would, put upon and finally trigger that retribution and retaliation in a way. Nothing's happening, so we don't live under the domain of a just God. No. In actuality, when you think of the God as this neutral, loving, benevolent presence, God, it would, in truth, would answer every prayer and request that's truly, originally authentic from the heart, that's aligned with the plan of God. So when there's people who are actually just living the status quo, they're actually affirming to God that that's something they're choosing. They're choosing it, so God cannot do anything about it, because these souls, these beings, are not aware of what's happening. But the problem with the light being intelligences needing to start coming more and more on Earth was because, like they said, transgression went off the charts. It went beyond the expected. Everything God, even as Jesus explained to us, is very much complex. The things started really getting more and more complicated. So they were starting to send more and more light initiatives. But not everyone, as you know, is brave enough to come here and say yes to the mission. Not everyone wants to come here. I'll tell you that. I'm not very happy being on Earth, but I gotta be, and I choose to be until the time comes when, I do and fulfill all of my needs and all the mission requests that I came here to do, until the very last moment when, I don't know, maybe I can no longer even breathe here on the planet. But until that time, I'm staying committed to this mission. So you have to know that one example I'll share with you is the transgression phenomena. The transgression phenomena and the hijacking of the human bodies, especially of the star-seeded origin beings, who the dark ones, they needed their intelligence to keep moving forward with their plans because they were so far away from source, they could no longer function. So they needed these aspects and picking up this information and mining their light intelligence, their star origin DNA, which in many cases on Earth we call the junk DNA, which we know that's not the truth. And because this experiment got so out of hand and many of these beings started having immense symptoms and even dying, a lot of people die from transgression. I nearly died as well, because these are very, very difficult energies to accept. So I'll explain my mission as my family of light has showed it to me. So in our quest to liberate the goddess, which is the feminine principle of life and the feminine Christ principle as life itself and life-giving, we needed to volunteer. We needed to witness the events of transgression because no human did. And even the star-born individuals, even the star seeds didn't, because they've fallen very much into this new age narrative in which is all love and light and all beings are benevolent and all that's coming to earth is super and dandy, and when you're being experimented on, it's for your good and you're getting upgrades. That was a huge lie. And so many beings in truth were being lied to, and that's a very hard fact to face. So we witnessed this from the higher perspective, as Aurea showed it to me a while ago, and we saw what was at stake. So because of us seeing what was at stake, we volunteered and we made a plan, and that plan was of course in alignment with divine plan, of God's plan, God's will. So we needed to be undercover because like on Earth, right, similar things are happening in the world of light beings. We needed to be undercover, so there's a whole reason that I'll explain now why this had to be so, because the darkness cannot go against a child of God, meaning a direct descendant. And in this case, for the transgression, they had to go. I think I explained that before once, maybe on Patreon, maybe here, I don't know. But I have to explain it, I think, even with greater depth today, like the whole perspective, taking it into account, right? Do the synthesis of all that was received by me in the last year or so, minus plus. So in order for them to go against the very divine chosen child who was a direct messenger, a direct descendant of God, right, the immaculate ones, they needed to sin against that. That's how they get their karma, because that divine child is so aware, it's illumined, it's getting directive directly from source. We can expose that. So they didn't know. In my case, they thought I'm just another of those star seeds. They can fool me. They can mine my body for intelligence and information and do these experiments of the electric ET light on me, right? They failed because they didn't know what was actually hiding, what consciousness was hiding in my body. First it was exposed, then it was, seen and witnessed for what it is. And in this last stage, which was actually last summer, when they were still trying to come to me, and that's when I used these words, it just came channeled out of me, and I was standing on top of this hill and I was yelling at them, with this all due diligence and a very vehement kind of energy. And I literally, this higher light being intelligence through me was saying to these beings that enough is enough, that now when they were exposed, they're going to be directly given to the justice court of the Prime Elohim directive, because they were witnessed and no one before was daring to be witnessing like that and exposing it. A lot of these souls who came on earth with the idea of serving and doing good, they've fallen more into the matrix, and it was getting more and more complex, and more souls were getting lost in this matrix. So there wasn't any other way but God asking us, who are in a way tantrika beings, masters of life force, asking us to do that on the behalf of many. I'll explain now why. So when you are a primordial primary one, you're the pure one, you and your embodiment, even if you're just a tiny little human, right, like myself, you embody the entirety of the 144,000 light quotient. That was already true in the example of Jesus the Christ. When he came on earth, he didn't just bring a mission of teaching the truth. That's just one example. That's still very much on the surface. But he came to expose what the darkness was doing specifically at that time, and he also was hidden. Remember how they were trying to find out who's the child of God and trying to kill the children? So they would, apprehensively do that before he would even be born and go through his initiations and remember who he is as a child of God. So in a way, that they couldn't sin against him, because there is this law that when you sin against someone who is the direct descendant of God, you actually go against God, so God can, God can judge you in that way. And that judgment is not the same as human judging. It's a divine judgment, like the 20 number card in tarot, divine judgment, when the forces of angelic powers come and they're trumpeteering, right? And they're witnessing events as they are. That's the judgment that took place during the transgression unveiling, and now with this whole beloved thing and hijacking and all that the darkness is doing through its evil attempts to sabotage everything that divine Godhead and the Trinity of Light is doing, right? Through many of its descendants and servants. And so, as you know, many people don't know anything about that because they just lack this awakening within their primary encoding, because they had so many earthly lifetimes. They don't know that anymore. Of course, most people are dealing with just how to survive. Now in our world, other half is just dealing with, when am I going to meet my twin flame? That's the other half. Or, when am I going to have a romantic relationship? That's still mostly what most humans are dealing with. You don't see humans going as deep and caring about things like that, right? So we needed to do this and go there to directly have a mission with these fallen ones. Because when they would directly go against someone who is a child of God, they would get persecuted, and that's what happened. So since then, no one dares to come near me. But there's still elements, like I said, if this energy is still trapped in my body, dying to get out. Sometimes it's so intense. Still happens, and when I actually release these energies, I'm like, raw, it's like evil coming out of me, and it's so scary, because the moment when it's left in that moment, it's like, what just happened? Who was that? It didn't feel like myself, like my own original energy. Okay, so this is how divine karmic retribution is happening directly through those who are children of God, direct descendants. They're not people with earthly incarnations, because they have the memory encoding. They come, and light beings have the intelligence to kind of mask the template so the dark ones wouldn't see and notice, and they couldn't be prepared and scheme around, But there was still something that happened during the transgression that was unpredictable, and that's why my team said they went even further than it was allowed, and that's why I suffered such terrible consequences, and I'm still feeling them in my body. So that's one thing. And the reason why light beings are so important and mostly attack, and why they're so persecuted, is because one light being, even in the expression of just like a tiny human, carries within them the entire encoding of the 144,000 light quotient. Just one being. This is not 144,000 light workers. You have many, many light workers now on the planet now, but they don't embody the 144,000 light quotient. Not yet. So when such a being comes in their power, remembers who they are, knows who they are, uses that knowing in complete and total surrender and service to God, right? They do on the behalf of themselves actually the work on the behalf of many, many beings who are still suffering and entrapped in the matrix and not knowing what's actually being done to them. You have people living their daily lives just going from routine to routine, their jobs, their relationships, whatever. Day-to-day lives, thinking that's just a life on earth, not even knowing what's happening behind the scenes. But we do, because we have the vision of God and we have the eyes. And these eyes are not like me judging these beings, but it's God judging them through me, and I'm just the vessel. The principle of illumined light just moves through me, and at times I won't feel it. I'm just going to be my regular human too, doing my routine, because that's just how things are done on earth, and you can't always be in that energy and that presence. But when it's time, when something culminates, the presence comes, and you're like, and I always see it like shooting arrows from me. So there's another aspect to it that God wants to talk about, which is the way that this transgression then affected the divine feminine, the empress, which is the true Christ feminine. For me, the only true empress is the Christ feminine principle. The woman, the physical woman that actually embodies the illumined feminine principle, which is the Christ aspect of the feminine self. Feminine pole of the polarity of sourcehood, of our divine creator nature. So the darkness did everything in its power to first disable and to dethrone the feminine as the divine queen. So she couldn't come to her throne, which is the Immaculate Throne, because this Luciferian essence wanted to remain on her throne. And remember, I was talking about her for such a long time. And we have company, as you can see, my cow friends. I love seeing them. I'm always so happy in their company. And so what I want to say now is you have to understand that Lucifer's essence will do everything in her power that she stays on the throne. And until that is so, the earth will be cycled in, no matter how much you call the white forces or the white hats, or these beings will try to do their thing. Because the dethroning, the divine justice, has to happen at the highest spirit level. Remember the truth, from spirit to matter. First, there is a spiritual warfare. Then the physical war is a reflection of that. The reason why we've been having nothing but warring states of consciousness, there's not been an era on this earth for eons when we'd actually have an era of peace. Sometimes that's manipulated into our informational fields, but it's actually not the truth. We've been having warring states all the time. And it's especially dangerous now because we're in a time of silent war of consciousness, which is actually the worst. So the only way to rebel is to first expose what's happening, and you need someone with the vision. You need someone who sees what God sees. And that's what is called the chosen one. The chosen one does not mean someone who is above others. It means someone who was chosen specifically by God as the carrier of that divine intelligence through which or who this divine Godhood works and moves through the life force intelligence. So that is a person who's fully just, fully pure, innocent in a way, but also wise. Like the wise fool, I always see it like that. It's difficult because in my own case, I always see it like I sacrificed as a being my entire body, my appearance, my looks, everything, in order for the majority to be free. You don't have most souls who are capable of doing that, let me tell you. Because most souls are afraid of even just doing those steps for just themselves. So you need someone with the greatest vigilant spirit and such unconditional love for the entirety of life, for all of life in creation, and the passion to do that through steps. And even when it's the worst, that being does never give up or quit. And I know who I am, and I know what my family is telling me, and they're saying that never before on earth has there been movement such as now, because that feminine Christ intelligence that was in a way triggered through me will trigger many others who are now nearing the completion of remembering their own Christ feminine expression. Whether you're a man or a woman, it's the same. It's the feminine Christ polarity of expression. So the seed of the Christ that was masculine, Jesus Christ already, as I've explained, he did that before. And I still have a course one day, maybe in the fall, of the Cosmic Christ that I'll share with all of you. Because it's much more channel information there of this entire journey of the Christ, as in feminine and masculine principles, joining, combining, because that's what we need to actually be successful in this experiment. And that's why my family of light has spoken to you about how important the Illumined Union is now in embodiment. You have a lot of beings who would say, well, but we are spirit, and when we're only merging our energies in spirit, that means we're pure. If we're merging them on earth, we're not. Not necessarily the truth, because we need physical embodiment to get to the level of what we need to initiate now in the cycle. So that's that. I want to share something with you. I was actually taking some cards with me. I have a new notebook, actually my first channeling in my new notebook, and it says, if you can dream it, you can do it. So that's that. And I pulled out some divine archetypes that God wants me to focus upon, to share with you, that are important for us to embody at this time. And the first one was actually God, the archetype of God. And it says, in its light attribute, it means benevolence and compassion, recognizing the eternal force within yourself and others, right? It's that sourcehood, it's the creatorship. It's many people don't even know what that is. We talk about it. There's these secret and laws and all these things and teachings that have been a very distorted version of what source actually is, because you have to start at the top, which is divine law. And divine law is very subtly written, and there's nothing beyond it. But you have to know it to know how to use it. You know, it's almost like in our own legislative system. If you don't understand the law, there's always going to be loopholes, and our system, our matrix, always works around these because people are innocent and naive and they don't know and they don't understand the law because it's very complex. That's why law was created, to be complex. But divine law, source law, is very simple at the top. So when you know those basic few top principles, you can know everything because everything will be applied through those first Trinity principles. But if you don't know these, you're set up for a failure, right? So the second one is servant, right? Serving God. I was very excited when I got this. The light attribute is delight in serving others with a free and loving heart. And then the last one is angel, and it says helping those in need with no expectation of return. And I think with those archetypes, God showed us what is the true nature of what makes us the Immaculate One. Knowing your sourcehood, knowing your divinity, knowing that you're here to serve God, not yourself, not others, but first and primarily you serve divine will. And through that will, you serve others. But serving others from a distorted version means you're giving off of yourself and away, and you get depleted. When you serve God and you know how to focus and aim your life force, you won't get depleted. But darkness does a lot of these experiments to kind of hijack this truth about this law, so we would all get depleted, those of us who are actually serving. But these aspects, as you know, also have their dark creation aspects, archetypes. So shadow attributes of being in this God archetype are despotism and cruelty, using power to control people, and that's actually what darkness is doing. The shadow aspect of the servant is using the lack of money as an excuse not to move forward with life. Many people do that. Like, I'm not going to do because I'm not supported, I don't have the money, I don't have the funds. You don't make the first step, right? You're weak in a way, in the way you demonstrate your affection towards God and appraisal and just union with God through union with yourself. And the shadow attribute of the angel is acting innocent or angelic. Oh, many people do that now in the New Age to mislead others, falsely claiming to be in touch with angelic guidance. There are so many false prophets right now, and they would serve you amazing amounts of money to do your readings and stuff and read your energies or Akashic records or whatever, just to get you. And sometimes they don't even know what they're doing, what kind of guidance they're channeling. But a child of God, a pure one, Immaculate One, will only guide you to go within. That's the truth. That's all you need to know. So one other thing I wish to share is there's these wisdom rays that came. Someone sent it to me via email. There was a long overdue package that I actually received yesterday on the day of the solstice. I want to thank that person who sent it to me. Thank you so much. There's these cards, the 7 basic rays. I won't read you all of them, but I'll read you the white one because it's basically the ascension ray, and in my own mission it's the most important. It's very beautifully described here, and whenever I read the words Serapis Bey, I just get tears in my eyes. So the 4th ray, manifestation of the ray of liberation and ascension consciousness. When the white flame starts working with you, you're going to have lots of tower moments, and you might think, what's happening? But you're actually starting to finally wake up and ascend. There's people in awakening states, and there's people who are already in ascending states. Awakening is just the first stage. It's not yet ascension, but it's a preliminary factor that you need in order to eventually ascend and start working with ascending energies. So the great masters and great ones will approach you only when you've done enough awakening up work, actually, right? So the 4th ray states, from within the heart center, the seed of your divinity, there is drawn forth and it will. Remember that. Anything and everything which is required to manifest the fullness of your divine essence in physical manifestation. The Ascension Flame by Lord Serapis Bey. So, again, I want to thank the person who sent me these. I have all the colors, beautiful affirmations. And the white ray is that. It's this focused intention on constantly bringing that white spiraling light to liberate all of life, because its main purpose is liberation. The next thing I want to share with you is a prayer. So when the Dark One started to oppress the feminine Christ, they made her doubt herself and be in the inability to be her own queen in her queendom, which means lack of money, lack of support, lack of people who would truly love her, people who just be parasitic vampiric with her, right? For example, that's what darkness does, because in order to inoculate you, right, they have to make you feel like you're this little unworthy little grain of nothing. So that's what they've been doing with the feminine principle, because the feminine Christ principle, when it wakes up within the earth field, it creates this most powerful ripple effect. And that's when the true divine feminine Christ principle, which is life, which is the alteration of that which we know as the masculine Christ, knowing, coming in the way of the truth, the expression of truth, which is vertical and knowing, the inner knowingness, the illumined knowing. The feminine brings that to life. The feminine principle you need in order to actually have differences, changes on the planet. You can't do anything with bypassing the feminine principle of life. It doesn't exist. No changes will happen. You might have your awakening in spirit, like many people now know certain things, but they can move forward with direct energy, conscious energy exchange and direction of moving that spiral of life forward. So God has shown me recently, and it's given me an assignment. I'm actually very much in the training mode right now again, because when the darkness created all these downgrades for the feminine, like throwing darts at her, what it did is it caused her to doubt herself, to doubt the people around her who maybe are just and loving, but they're just, not showing it, or they're not mature enough to show it the right way, or people who would have love for, like true love for the feminine, but maybe they just don't know how to express it. Let's just say it like that. So with all this transgression and this energetic buildup, like how I've experienced it myself, is it keeps me always in this defensive state. Like everything in all of life is always against me. It's not as much as it was before, let's say like a year ago, but there's still elements and leftovers of that. For me now, it's a test to drop that defensive Queen of Swords mode and move into this compassionate, white light, feminine Queen of Hearts. Because knowing that that's my only source in need of defense anyway, is to be God's love and be wrapped and held and carried within it all the time. So God gave me an assignment, and God also gave me a prayer yesterday when I channeled. I want to share the whole channeling with you, maybe on Patreon. There's a whole channeling. Some of it is very personal in terms of Illumined Union. But God gave me a prayer that helps the feminine, which is our embodied counterpart self within, the feminine Christ principle within us, that the feminine now embraces life again after all the transgression, all the hardship, all the troubles, all the spinning and looping, and all these difficulties that she had to endure in a way. So that's what God said as the prayer that can be used. Beloved God, I am. Humble me in my love and the way I devote myself to you and my beloved. Then please resurrect me and my beloved from the ashes of the old despair into rising new dawn of love. I am yours, so please show me the way. Show me how to love truly and to be your humble servant always, every day. Thank you. Amen. So you might use your own words, approximations. I started doing these prayers. We're going to do them every day again now, because in the past we were so bombarded with stuff that we couldn't handle it all. And it just wasn't the right energy space. But now God is saying, now work starts now this summer. Rest, but also work, spiritual work. And it's very important now for the feminine to start feeling supported again, because with that, she will create a field of this compassionate state. And it's not going to be just for her, like in my example. It's not going to be just for me. But creating that against all odds and all the oppositions is creating a state of godhood on earth. It's almost like no matter what, against all odds, you are of God, and you live that freely with utmost devotion to life, and then life feeds that back to you. So also I was shown and told by my family of light that there were many attempts and failed experiments on our own behalf as well. But the answer I've gotten yesterday through the channeling is that God oversaw everything, all the unfolding, and that at this time, this particular time, which is challenging, but it's also a test for me as well, to pass this rite of initiation, to turn into the inner feminine softness, and to not allow the dark inception and control to do that to me anymore, to make me constantly defensive and in defense mode, to go into this cave of the heart, this constant heart replenishment. They said that God this time, it won't allow for anything to touch the feminine anymore. So it was quite an interesting guidance. We're doing these readings now. Every day I'm going to try to channel more. I'll share maybe some of these messages further on Patreon, what I receive. But it's the summer now. We're officially in the summer months. Summers here where I live are very short, so they have to be used wisely and, be like the Heidi outside in nature. So I hope you enjoyed this video and understand some of the things that are not very light for you, for us to consider, but they are as they are. And I'm not saying these things with any kind of sense of entitlement. I just want to speak the truth. I want to show you why initiatives of light beings are so important on the planet and why so many of them fail, because there's so much attempts of darkness to sabotage this, because one light being holds the power of thousands of beings who call themselves light workers, in how much they exude this Christ light. It's incomparable when you know yourself as this direct descendant. And then with that exuding presence, you channel that onto others so they can further come more into their own Christ Elohim presence, which was their first original spark of creation as well. So they can return home in their own time, under their own terms, and ascend as well. Through their own choice, their own divine will, because you actually go to earth, you start exploring and experiencing life through free will, but actually ascend by embracing divine will once again into your life, into your soul, the magic of spirit. So thank you for watching. I hope you will have a beautiful summer. It was a longer video again, but I had to explain these things quite diligently. Thank you for watching, as always, with so much love, wisdom, and power straight from my heart. The wind is making it hard for me to speak, and I think we have Mercury going direct again, so that's kind of tricky sometimes. So the energies are intense. I wish you nothing but divine glory, but for us to really be in that space, we have to see the truth as it is. Truth opens the gates to love and knowing who we truly are as divine creators. Thank you, and I'll see you again soon, one day. Bye for now.
Come into my world, the world of the elven song, magical.